Hey, this is Kev from Blender Binge. In today's video, I'm going to be going over HDR images inside of Blender 2.8 and a really quick way to set them up and get them working in your scene. Ready? Let's go. So, Blender 2.8 is pretty awesome in that it gives you this new render engine called EEVEE. Okay, so if we go over to the shading tab here, you see that we have this really cool new workspace for shading. So what we're going to do is quickly, I'm going to show you this little window, and then we're going to go into using HDR images. So this little window is really cool in that it shows you a kind of shaded model of your scene. And if you look under here, under the render tab here, you have render engine set to EEVEE. You can also set that to Cycles, OpenGL, or EEVEE. And you see that you have these little shader balls kind of showing you what's in your scene, okay, without getting too technical here. So here we have the wireframe view, we have a solid view, we have a look dev view, which is default, and then we have the rendered view. Okay, so if I hit 0 and go into camera view, I'm going to 0 on the keyboard, and I'm going to go ahead and lock my camera to the view. So that way, right now, if I spin, I go out of the camera view. So I want to lock that down. So I want to be kind of holding the camera. So I'm just going to hit 0. I'm in the camera view. Go to this little plus over here and hit lock camera to view. Now if I spin around, I'm holding the camera. Right? And I'm just going to go ahead. I see that lamp out there. I'm going to right click on the lamp, hit delete. Okay, get rid of that. So now my scene is just being lit by this background. So if I go over here to this little world tab and I hit use nodes, you see absolutely nothing happens here. That's because we're still in object mode. So if I change over here to object, from object to world, I now see that I have my world. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and plug in an HDR texture into this background node, and you'll see what this is going to do in a second. So I hit Shift A, I go to texture, and I go to environment texture. Okay, and I thank user Ghost Unknown here for pointing it out in my last HDR video that this actually does map much better than using the mapping thing that I used in that video. And there's a good reason that I failed to use this in the last video, which I explained in the comments briefly, but anyway, we're moving on. So thanks Ghost Unknown. Here we go. Environment texture, we plug this into color, and we get this magenta. Okay, this big magenta hue shows up. That's just telling you, whenever you see this in Blender, it's just telling you that you have an image, something is looking for an image, but the image isn't found. So it just kind of flashes this really bright color at you saying, whoa, we got a problem. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and hit open. Okay, and I go to my HDR images, and I'm going to choose Tokyo Big Sight that I got off HDRI Haven. Open it. And there you go. You have the background now is lighting your scene. Okay, now you can't really see it with this cube. I mean, you kind of can. You can kind of see where the light's coming from. But I'm going to get rid of this cube, so I'm just going to right click, hit delete. Okay, so I'm going to go to add, mesh, and I'll say Suzanne the monkey, because she has a lot of cool curves here that you can actually see what's happening here. So if I go to object and I hit smooth, shade smooth, okay, you can see that Suzanne is being lit and kind of reflecting the environment. So I'll make this even more pronounced here by just changing from world to object, and I'm going to hit new, and that gives Suzanne a new shader, and I'm going to bump up the metallic, and I'm going to bump down the specular, and I'm going to bump down the roughness. And you can see that in real time now, inside this EEVEE renderer, this HDRI image is lighting Suzanne. Okay, she looks like she belongs in this scene. Pretty cool. That's a really quick way to go ahead and I'll go back here to world. Really quick way to just go ahead and add in HDR images and have them light your scene. So if I wanted to change this, I can just go back to my folder and I can say glass passage, which is another HDRI image that I've had. Okay, and now she's being lit inside this glass passage area. And you can see all the reflections are correct and she's being lit. And if you go ahead and start playing around with her shader that we gave her, okay, you can see here, it's a pretty matte shader here. She's just being lit by this environment. Right? So that's the quickest and fastest way to go ahead and use HDR in your scenes. Now, one last thing I want to talk about here is when you render, okay, if I go to my little render tab, you don't have to go to render tab. You can just hit F12 on the keyboard and it'll start rendering. Okay. If you look here inside your rendering tab, you see the view now. So if you go over to this little tab, color and alpha, up here, you can see that if I go to alpha, the whole thing is white. That's not rendering Suzanne with transparency, which means if I took this into Photoshop, you're not going to be able to separate the background. So what you want to do in this case, if you want to render her without rendering the background with her, you go over to where it says film, okay, under render, and instead of alpha here, you change alpha to transparent. And when you render again, I have this big window here, you now get a nice transparent cutout lit Suzanne. So if I go color in alpha, or I just go to alpha here, sorry, you'll see that she's cut out. So if you bring her into Photoshop, background's gone. Okay, and that's with using EEVEE. All right, so this is still up in the air whether they're gonna keep changing this for the full release, but I have a feeling that this is probably gonna stay the way it is as at the time of this video. So with that, hope you learned something, hope you got something out of it, and if you did and you like it, then definitely hit like and subscribe and hit that little bell notification because I keep making more of these videos pretty often now, so you'll see all my new stuff. Thanks, talk to you later.